The Shawn Carlson experiment is known as the most famous test that falsifies astrology. Why is this CSI-funded study, published in 1985, still the go-to research for critics today?
The main answer is that it was published in Nature, which was one of the top scientific journals. And how it was published is a more interesting story. Well, the editor of Nature at that time was a skeptic called John Maddox, and he was a fellow of PSYCOP. Now, it's PSYCOP who sponsored the Carlson test. Maddox managed to get it in. I don't believe it was published in the main body of the magazine. It was published in a section that is not normally peer-reviewed. It's like a review or letter section within the journal. But the fact that it went into Nature makes it almost unassailable in terms of being considered the top study. But no less than three professors have said that it's a flawed study, and including the most famous psychology professor at the time, and one of the most published was Hans Eysenck. That led on to me doing a study, reviewing why they came up to those conclusions.
So PSYCOP funded the study after the Gokulin controversy to try and improve their standing, basically, with their skeptical inquiry mission.
Yes, they did. The Gokula experience was a very bad one for PSYCOP and for Paul Kurtz personally, because a lot of people resigned because they realized the skeptics were not being objective. They were debunking. And they didn't want to be part of that. That isn't science, And so this was a kind of rescue attempt. But of course, the way it was billed was not as a PSYCOP presentation. It was actually Shawn Carlson was an undergraduate physics undergraduate. Why he was doing a sociological study, which it was, for a physics paper is hard to know. And his guiding professor, mentor, was also a fellow of PSYCOP. And it was only much later that Paul Kurtz said, yeah, we did that. It was ours, chalk it up, and it was their, it was their victory. And that's fine. It wasn't a victory for science. It wasn't a victory for truth. And it was not a good thing for astrology and the process of astrology, because I think that result put the kibosh on a lot of research. I think there were papers before, and there were really good astrologers around who just think that the moment you look under the bonnet in astrology, you're going to find that it's just nothing, it doesn't stand up to science, and that's wrong.
So you reviewed the Carlson tests and found research design flaws and evidence of p-hacking. Can you just briefly take us through the highlights of that?
Yeah. Well, with the Carlson test, it was, he gathered together about 100 students, and they did a self-fulfilling report called the California Personality Inventory. It's a very old-fashioned type of report. And they were first asked, could they identify their own chart, their own psychological profile, based on their own reporting from three others, and they couldn't. Not to a significant level. And then they were asked to identify their birth chart out of three, and they could, but only to marginal significance. And then they were asked to rate each match, and then they could to a significant level. And I suppose but the only way we know this is when it was published, you would not see this because it was separated. The studies were separated out, and you couldn't. In fact, two studies were actually with different sample size were merged in order to create three histograms. And you look at them and you think, well, that looks random to me. And but when you put the numbers together from three different categories, then you start to see a pattern.